welcome back to part 2 of the best ever Zelda game for the 35th anniversary of The Legend of Zelda. Now, if you haven't seen part 1, make sure you click that link up there and watch that first, where I get to sit down with Arekkz from Arekkz Gaming and we just nerd out about the franchise that I love. So let's get straight back into it. Let's talk about Link. So obviously the game is called Legend of Zelda, but the main protagonist is Link. Yes, the guy who wears the green tunic, his name isn't Zelda. All right, let's just put that out there as a disclaimer for anyone who is confused. But I really want to break down why Link is so iconic. Because when I think about video game characters, like between us, like we both work in video games, we've been gaming since we've kids, and we played so many games, and there's characters that you love and characters that I love, but for some reason Link is just such an iconic character and he just goes with you forever. What do you think it is about Link that's just so iconic?
I feel like to a degree it's almost like, well, there's a couple of things for me. Like one of them, I know obviously he's got a face. So like in some games, you know, like in the past, there've been games where developers have been like, oh, we want you to be able to put yourself in this character's shoes. So they'll like hide the face or something, which makes sense. For Link, it's not quite the same, but they have still done a similar thing because they've never given him a voice because they still want you to basically be able to be him, short of him being like, you know, that kind of thing. Like, so outside of that, I think it's also just like in a lot of the games, he kind of just wakes up in bed. It's just like, I could just be like, it could literally be me on a regular morning, be like, oh, yo, I just woke up, and it's like, and then there could be some fairy that's like, yo, we need you to save the galaxy. Like, you know, it's kind of like, he doesn't wake up, you know, you don't suddenly see some crazy intro montage where he's laying waste to like thousands of beasts, even though there have been the stories where he's been that legendary hero. You know, a lot of the time he'll wake up and it's pretty standard. He's just like some lazy guy who's just overslept. And then he goes off and becomes this hero. So it's almost like he could just be you. And then you could be that star.
I also feel like he has such a, and I know it sounds corny to say, a childlike innocence to him. Like there's something about Link that just feels really pure, and it's a really hard thing to convey as a character. And it probably works is because it's Nintendo. Nintendo are very kind of, people quote them as kid-centric games and games that are like for the family and stuff. And there's just something about him that even though he's slaying bare soldiers, slaying bare people, there's nothing about him that just doesn't seem pure-hearted. He always seems like he wears his heart on his sleeve and he just wants to help everyone.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. And I guess also like in line with that, it's kind of the same reason people watch like shonen anime, right? It's like, you know, you've got the kind of main hero who's like no one to write home about. You've got like Naruto, who's like this forgettable kid who becomes powerful. You've got like Deku, who becomes powerful. You know, in all those typical stories, it's like your average supposed run-of-the-mill guy, but then suddenly, because he's just determined, he works damn hard and he just won't give up. Like even when he's getting slapped down by someone that's super strong, he's still just like, I'm going to pick up my sword. I'm still going to run towards you. I don't even know if I can win this, but I'm going to do it. And I feel like that's precisely what like makes people gel with this. You know, whereas on the flip side, you've got other characters who like, you'll create this crazy backstory. You'll be like, yeah, this guy is a legendary warrior. You know, you have the capacity already to lay waste to 1,000 people. Whereas you're a little dude in a green tunic. Like, I mean, when you start off, you've got a little wooden shield. Like, what do you honestly hope to do with that? But apparently now you're going to go save the world.
And know, I like what you said. I like that they make Ganon batter in bare times. Like he never, like, it's not like, I feel like Breath of the Wild is probably the first time that you go to Ganon for the first time and you're able to just beat him. Unless you like, because you've built enough up. But throughout the games, I feel like you're getting bullied, man. And he kind of takes you in him. All right, cool. He's super iconic, amazing character. We love him. Now, got to talk about something really important. All right, I'm gonna take you back to 2000. All right, Space World Tech demo.
Yes.
All right, we got to see the first time a high graphical version of Legend of Zelda on which would be coming out on the GameCube, Nintendo's new most powerful console. Like we're finally seeing a realistic adult Legend of Zelda game that looks crazy. And then they release a trailer for Wind Waker. What was your thoughts?
So it was definitely confusing because obviously back at the time, like back in the day, like I never, this was before like being on the internet was like a really big thing. So I used to get my news from like gaming magazines. So I got like I remember had on the cover where it was like Space World and you're seeing there. And I remember I used to watch that trailer on repeat because you got that room with like Ganondorf fighting with Link and he's probably like blocking and there's some cool stuff and you're like, what? And then you see the flipping spider. That was so sick. And then like, but it's interesting because I guess because it kind of also goes in line with like the way that I am with games now. Like a lot of the people will be like, oh, why have you played these games that are rubbish, or why have you been so forgiving of these games? Like I'm someone that just enjoys games regardless, right? So like I wasn't really at the point or the age where I was like, oh man, I can't believe they've taken this game away from me, because I was still like, yo, they've given me a Zelda game to play regardless. So like it was definitely shocking because I was like, oh, that was cool, but I wouldn't say, because I know that initially when Wind Waker was first revealed, it was like people were angry. They were like, what have you done? Why have you taken this realistic looking space world game from us? But I guess because back then, and again, like, Twitter wasn't really a thing. Like speaking online outside of like message boards wasn't too much. So all I really had was like magazines to go by. So my news was somewhat broken up. So I wouldn't say it bothered me too much. Because then I ended up going and playing Wind Waker, which was an incredible game.
So I hated when I saw that. I was so angry. I was so excited to see what I thought Ocarina of Time was going to be, but in a higher graphical, stronger console. Because by this time, I've played games like Final Fantasy VII. So I'm ready for something next level for Zelda. And I hated the look of it. And I was so wrong. So wrong, because the art style in Wind Waker is incredible, and you actually feel like you're playing in a anime or a cartoon. That those fight scenes are incredible. I still honestly hate the look of Link. I think he looks like Stewie from Family Guy. I'm not feeling it. The long face. I don't like the look of that Link. That Toon Link is the only Link that I don't like the look of. But
really?
Yeah, that game's incredible. I love traveling on the sea. Like I loved how it, because obviously the GameCube wasn't strong enough back then to make a real big open world. So the way they pieced it together and made it feel like a huge open world. Like the soundtrack when you was traveling through the sea, like, oh, that game, man. So what would you say is the fundamental thing about that game, why you love it so much?
I think, so I mean, part of it was definitely like the art style, because I've always liked sort of like the cell shading thing anyway. I think also, just to kind of touch on what we were saying before, I think the other reason that it didn't bother me so much with the Space World thing was because my exposure to that was somewhat delayed. Because again, like when I was younger, like, I wasn't as like on the news as I would be now. So like I might have caught the Space World trailer like slightly later than it actually was. And because I didn't get GameCube as soon as it launched, I got it later on as like a bundle. I got my GameCube bundled with Wind Waker. So I kind of like, it's almost like I was aware of the Space World stuff, but I guess I didn't have it in like real time. So I didn't have that sort of like build it up and shatter it. It was more like I'm aware of this and I'm aware of this simultaneously. But yes, but again with Wind Waker, it was an expansion on the sort of adventure thing, because suddenly you're going to the point where previous Zelda games that I played had let me explore, and you could often kind of go off and do small things, like Majora's Mask or Ocarina, or like side activities. But in Wind Waker, the sheer magnitude of the map, that you find all these tiny little random islands that might not have too much on, but suddenly, you've got a camera where you can take photos of things, and you can then just go to these random islands. And like from a completionist point of view, I was like, well, I want to go and clear, like reveal everything on the map and do all that stuff. So for me, it was just the open nature of it, and combat. Like combat in Wind Waker is so sick. I'm sorry, but like the fact that you can roll behind a knight, slice up, cut the ropes on his armor, and it falls off. Like what? And
the way the colors are springing on the screen is so sick. And I also really love that once again they really define Zelda in a new way, like having a whole new way. Like Zelda's a pirate. She's out there living life. She's not just locked up in a castle. She's really living it. So I feel like the Wind Waker is a super special game. All right.
Yeah.
Now, it's one thing that's really synonymous in Legend of Zelda games is dungeons and bosses. And it's weird because people don't talk about dungeons enough when they talk about Zelda. But then when like Breath of the Wild came out, there was kind of quite a big uproar of not having those dungeons. And one of my favorite games for like dungeons and bosses is Twilight Princess. I feel like Twilight Princess has got some of the best dungeons in a Legend of Zelda game. Like, I don't know what the name it is, but you know that dragon thing, and then you're on the spiral thing, and you're jumping from side to side. Like, the dungeons are really incredible, and that's when you really get into that kind of the mazes and having to use the maps and stuff like that. Now, I love almost all dungeons. I hated the water temple in Ocarina of Time. Like, that was just stress. But I love Zelda dungeons, and mainly I love actually discovering and getting a new item. Like, it feels like I've worked through this dungeon, I'm halfway through, I've got a new item, I'm learning this item's allowing me to complete this dungeon, and then I go and face off against an incredible boss. And Legend of Zelda has some amazing bosses. So out of anywhere, what's your favorite game for dungeons, or a dungeon that really steps out to you?
So here's the thing, it's interesting because now that I think back about it, right? Like, Twilight Princess is, the dungeons that stand out in my mind are not Twilight Princess in the conventional sense. Like, I could almost draw out room by room Ocarina of Time dungeons because that's how iconic they are to me. But when you think about like the magnitude of like Twilight Princess dungeons, they were super epic. Because I mean, that was in some of the crazy trailers as well. Like, I think back to, I forget how emotional I got when it came to flipping Twilight Princess. When that was announced and they dropped that was one of the trailers where they made it look like a badass, because he's riding out on his horse towards the hordes of enemies. The orchestral music starts dropping and he just starts slashing through them. And then you start seeing these crazy dungeons that have this insane scale. So I would say Twilight Princess, like, I can't visibly picture all the dungeons specifically, but I know that in terms of just like feel, they were epic. But I still think going back to like probably Ocarina of Time, I really, really liked the Death Mountain, like the fire temple, obviously as like an adult, because obviously you have the hammer, you know, you're like, you need to have the tunic to be in there, but then you also kind of enter it and like come in at different like positions, because obviously you got the different sort of heights to it. But that was one of the ones that sort of stands out to me, because the fight at the end of it, when you're fighting like Volvagia and like that, like, and you have to wait till like the hole comes out and smack him on the head with the hammer. Like, that's probably one of my most kind of like memorable dungeons, I think.
Yeah, that dungeon's sick. And like I said, like, Zelda is incredible through dungeons throughout all of the games. One of the things people hate on the most about Twilight Princess is the intro. Like, people say it's really slow, super handheldy. But I actually quite enjoyed it. It was quite nice. The thing that I love about Legend of Zelda is Link being an ordinary guy, and him like out there doing his sheeping and them thing, and being a farmer. Like, I don't know if it's just the RPG guy in me, because RPGs are pretty slow going forward anyway, and I'm used to that. But I kind of found that okay. The thing I really disliked about it is having to be Wolf Link. I really didn't enjoy that. How did you feel about having to become a wolf?
I didn't mind it, to be honest. You know, because again, like I just like new mechanics and stuff like that. I mean, I would say I definitely preferred being regular Link than Wolf Link. Like, if I had a choice, I would always be Link. But I still kind of liked the, I like kind of what it kind of brought to the table, because it gave you like a new way to solve puzzles and different things like that. So it was pretty cool. I mean, I wouldn't put it as like a highlight thing. Like, you know, if like a new Zelda game came out, I wouldn't be like, oh, they've got to bring back Wolf Link. But I think for the purpose of the game, especially when like some of the parts when, you know, you get outside the castle and you're like running across the roof, like as a wolf, like that was kind of cool.
I also think, like, graphically, Twilight Princess has held up really well, because a lot of people say that like old generation like 3D games don't look very good, but when you go back and look at Twilight Princess, it still looks really good. And I'm talking about like obviously the original Wii 2006 release, not the Wii U remaster.
Oh yeah.
One thing I really liked about the game as well is Zan. Like, I liked having a whole new antagonist. Even though, like I said, I love that whole Ganondorf being part of the pressure of the whole game. It was kind of cool having Zan, and because I think on the handheld games they have a lot of different antagonists, but on the mainline ones they don't really. And because I didn't play a lot of the handheld games, it was really cool to kind of have someone else, and even more the way they murk him at the end.
Yo, yes. That's that. You know what? It's funny though. This, because again, like for a game that that comes from Nintendo. Nintendo is like a family-friendly company. Know how to go dark. Like even in Wind Waker, a happy, friendly, colorful game. The end of it, you literally sword plant Ganondorf in the forehead. Like, I'm sorry, but they know how to make dark games. Like, it's
100%. And that's that ending scene where Link just in his chest.
Yeah.
Mad. Now, I feel like Skyward Sword, which released on the Wii in 2011, is probably the most controversial game in the series. I feel like it's the most controversial game in the series because I feel like there's hardcore people like 26 who love it, who scream how amazing it is, but so many people just felt fatigued and kind of was the game that kind of made them kind of go off the series. What is your relationship with Skyward Sword?
See, this is the thing. It baffles me because I genuinely love Skyward Sword, and it's funny because whenever like I tweet about it or something like that, there'll always be someone that will pipe up and be like, "Oh, I hate Twilight Princess, I hate Skyward Sword, or it's like a bad game in the series." And it's like, like if somebody can tell me in the comments, like if you don't like Skyward Sword, why do people not like this game? Like I don't get, because to me, it had a fantastic art style. I love the art style for it. It refined the motion controls for the combat, because Twilight Princess was great for the most part, but there were some times where the motion control fighting was a little bit, here or there. But then Skyward Sword, I feel like they refined it really well. I loved the item upgrading element. Like that was full on RPG element. The fact that you could take something like a bow and it changes its shape because you've upgraded it enough. I like the world. I like there was, and even some of the dungeons and the optional stuff you could do in that game like later on was so sick. So I genuinely loved that game, and I don't know why people don't like it.
So it's really weird because I feel like when I played Skyward Sword, I remember enjoying it. But when I look back at it, like I don't look back at it and think of it with fond memories. And I don't know what it is. There's nothing about it that really makes me feel like I love my time when I was playing it. So I love the story. I think it's probably it's the best story in terms of the relationship between Link and Zelda. Like, I feel like for the first time, they're really close. Where in the other ones, I feel like they're always kind of apart. And I feel like their relationship's super dope. Art style's cool. I love Skyloft. Loft Wings are cool. I still prefer Epona, but I did enjoy the Loft Wings. I could not stand, though, the Imprisoned. And I think that was so repetitive. And I felt like it was really weird because I always feel like in Zelda games, I never feel like they have a repetitive loop, even though every game is a repetitive loop. That's all games are, is playing. But the Imprisoned was the first time I felt like, I'm here again. Why am I fighting this again? Did you have that kind of feeling?
I'm trying to remember actually. The
Imprisoned, the big black thing with literally have to kill it like 4 times.
Yeah, you know what? Okay, no, I can definitely. I honestly, that bit wasn't that prevalent in my memory, so obviously it didn't bother me. Maybe when I was playing through, maybe it was kind of like a little bit annoying, but it didn't obviously bother me enough to kind of stand out in my mind. So I didn't mind too much. But like now you mentioned it, like obviously having to kind of go back and do that again. But then again, that's kind of the similar sort of thing you had to do in Phantom Hourglass. So I don't think that bothered me too much, but I feel like it just shone because you had, in a similar way to what you were talking about with Twilight Princess, you then also had a couple of people to kind of go face to face. I always forget his name. Who's the dude with the white hair?
I'll put his name on screen. Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Obviously you got him early on, but
Grigum, something like that. Begins with a G.
I can see it, but I can't. Yeah. But basically, he was quite cool because obviously you have some fights with him throughout. But then obviously one of the reasons I love Skyward Sword so much is it has quite possibly one of the best final bosses. Like Demise is a literal bad man. Like this guy stands there like with his chunky sword, his like huge flaming hair, and you have like some like that is a full-on anime battle when he's bringing lightning down and you're fighting him and like you're going like toe to toe. That is one of my favorite final boss battles in a Zelda game. It's so cool,
so sick. All right, so we got to talk about it, the game that changed the Legend of Zelda. We are talking about Breath of the Wild, which released in March in 2007 for the Wii U and then also on the Nintendo Switch as a release title. And when I say change the game, I remember watching the first trailer and seeing Link in this blue tunic and being able to be like the faith Nintendo was like, do you know what? Everyone knows Link for this green tunic. We're going to change his whole look. And this look is so iconic and it works. And then being able to just make it open and them adding voice acting and removing traditional dungeons and having shrines. Like, just briefly, just tell me how much, I know you love Breath of the Wild, but just tell me what it is about that experience that really meant something to you.
I mean, that it genuinely is. I've mentioned it a few times during the thing, but this was the embodiment of like adventure for me. And I think it was so important to me as well, because by the time Breath of the Wild came out, obviously I've been like, you know, creating content on YouTube for a while. Like for me, like a lot of the time a new game will come out and the way in which I experience that game is very different to how I used to, because obviously when you create content, you have to look at games differently. You have to be like, all right, I've got to blitz through this, I've got to do that. So I very rarely get to quote unquote enjoy a game in a conventional sense, but Zelda is so precious to me. When Breath of the Wild came out, I was like, I'm going to enjoy it. Like I was fortunate, like Nintendo got me an early copy because I was like, I don't want to be making videos, have someone spoil it online for me. It's like, I'm not someone that really cares about spoilers for anything apart from Zelda. I'm like, if you spoil my Zelda game, I will drop kick you out the window. Like I was like, so I literally went off grid for a week. I was like, I'm not going to think about videos. I'm just going to enjoy this as if I am just a gamer, not a content creator. And it was fantastic because for a week, I was just sitting there in my own world. I could go wherever I wanted. There was no pressure to be like, oh, you've got to finish the game quickly to make videos. So when I decided one day to be like, oh, I want to go and climb that random mountain because there's some cool looking thing up there, I'd have to think, no, I should focus on the story because I'm running out of time. Like I just did it. So for a solid week, I was able to explore, and that sandbox nature. And it's interesting because I know there's tons of open worlds, and people will be like, oh, you know, some of the best open worlds are like Red Dead and stuff like that. But to me, Zelda is, in my opinion, one of the best open worlds because for me, it gave me the greatest sandbox experience. You know, the physics experience paired with the fact that so many games in their marketing spiel are like, oh yeah, you see this location, you can go there, but you can't actually go there. There's an invisible wall. Breath of the Wild is literally, you want to go there, you can go there. Like everywhere on the map, you can go. So I love the exploration. I love it. It was 100% like the ultimate adventure for me.
Do you know what blows my mind about Breath of the Wild? I remember playing Breath of the Wild for must be about 80, 90 hours, yeah? Mm-hmm. And then one day I just booted it up, jumped in, and I was like, what's that over there in the corner? And I kept on going. And it was this giant maze, this huge maze. And I'm like, how did I miss this? I've been playing this game for close to 100 hours. And this huge maze has just come out of nowhere. And the amount of moments I had like that of just discovering things that were just like, wow.
Yeah, there's a couple of those that like really stood out to me as well. And it was kind of cool because you could play it in different ways. Everyone I spoke to had a different experience. Like I'd be chatting to 2-6 during the week I was playing it. And he's like, yo, I went on this random adventure and I came across this like lightning wizard. And I was like, oh, what the hell? But for me, like my two moments that stood out to me, like I was running across the bridge at one point, and you know the dragons that fly through the sky? Yeah. I saw it for the first time. I was like, what is this? But obviously I'm on the ground. I'm like, how do I even get this? So I'm pacing after it for a while, and it starts flying over the mountains, and I can't even hope to keep up. And obviously at that time, you know, the game isn't out. Nobody else has played it because I had a review copy. There's no nobody to speak to online. I don't know what this thing is, and I'm just like, okay. So you know, I left it on there, and I went on my other adventure. I went to like a far corner of the map, and I just see this little like pony looking thing, and I'm like, oh, what's this? And I walk up and get closer and find out it's a Lionel. I'm just like, and this was before they officially introduced you to Lionels. So I found like the big tough guy, and I'm like, let me go fight this guy. One tap, dead. And I was like, I'll come back later.
You wasn't ready.
I was not ready. You just blew me up.
One thing that I also really want to just throw in about Breath of the Wild is how great Age of Calamity was. So I know you played Age of Calamity. Now, I'm not into Warriors and Musa games. It's not my thing. But oh my goodness, being back in that world was so incredible. And Impart is a G. Impart is so gangster with the moves. So gang. And you know what? And this is probably going to be very controversial. And I know they've completely changed the story. And we're not going to get into spoilers into Age of Calamity. But I honestly prefer the story in Age of Calamity over original Breath of the Wild. I'm not saying it's a better story, but I just felt like it was an actual story. And that was the one thing for me that was missing from the Breath of the Wild adventure.
Yeah, no, I can completely agree. Yeah, like I'm exactly the same. Like I've never completed a Warrior/Musou game in my life apart from this one. Like even Hyrule Warriors, like the previous one. Like I played it for a bit, but like a lot of the time they just don't, once I've laid waste to like a few hundred enemies, I'm like, I'm kind of done. But this one I was like, because of the story link, I wanted to do it, and it was fantastic. And I definitely, I feel like there was a better paced story in that, and that is the one thing. Well, there's a couple of things. Like for me, it's always a difficult discussion because Breath of the Wild, I love it on so many levels, but because there's often that difficulty when you give someone the freedom to go anywhere, it can be quite hard to craft. Not impossible, but it can be quite hard to craft a cohesive story because you can't guarantee that every person is going to go here and then to there. So you kind of sometimes need a bit of linearity to sort of guide that. So I do feel like, and that's why for me, it's all eyes on Breath of the Wild 2, because like, I feel like if you take Breath of the Wild, but just put a few of the traditional Zelda elements back in, like dungeons, specific items from those dungeons, a more cohesive story, you could quite literally have the best Zelda game they have ever made. So I'm so looking forward to Breath of the Wild 2 for that reason.
Fam, you could have the best game ever made.
Yes, 100%.
All right, cool. So we're coming to the end. Thank you so much for joining me. I know you've all been waiting for it. I kind of think I figured it out what it might be, but what is your favorite Legend of Zelda game ever?
So this is the tough one, right? Because it's like, I feel like every time I have this conversation, I say it, right? But like, like normally with like favorite games, you say it and you know 100% you mean it. Like, I feel like I say it, but there's a reservation in my heart because it's so tough. Like, it has to go to Ocarina of Time, right? But what happened with me because Ocarina is my first ever Zelda game, every time a new Zelda game came out, I would always compare it to Ocarina. I'd be like, does it beat Ocarina? Sometimes it would in certain elements, but it would never give me the holistic experience that in my opinion was better. When Breath of the Wild came out, there were so many things it did for me that was better. Like, I love the expanse, I love the open world, I love like so much of the stuff. But because it was missing a few things, even though technically speaking it is a better game, I don't feel like I can say Breath of the Wild is my number one. So I feel like if I was allowed to have two at number one, it would be both of those. But if I have to pick one, Ocarina.
Exactly the same as me. Ocarina of Time is my favorite. And I think if Breath of the Wild had that more linear story with everything, I don't know how they would do it. Now, I'm not a game developer, but how they would do it, that same linear story, but everything that was in Breath of the Wild. And if they managed to do it with Breath of the Wild 2, I think that might become my favorite game ever because I love Ocarina of Time. But Breath of the Wild is just so special on so many levels. Arekkz, thank you so much, man. I needed this. I needed to be able to just nerd out with someone and just really talk about Legend of Zelda. Just quickly before you go, what are your hopes that you want Nintendo to do for the anniversary, and where can the people find you?
So anniversary, I really hope they kind of do what they did for like Mario and they re-release some of them. I know obviously like we got HD remakes for like Wind Waker and Twilight Princess on Wii U, but like a lot of people didn't play Wii U, so just bring them to Switch. Give us HD Skyward Sword, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, heck, even throw like Ocarina on there if you want to, but like they won't do a full remake. And then I would love it if, as well as like alongside Breath of the Wild 2, they announced that Grezzo were working on like a Minish Cap remaster in the style of Link's Awakening, because that would be bang. That would be sick. So that's my hopes.
I need Wind Waker on my Switch so much. But you know what I really want as well? I want a chic game. I want a Zelda in chic costume, having the fighting styles of Impa, but can do stealth stuff like Metal Gear Solid. I don't know how they would make it, but I need that in my life as well.
So Tingle needs to come back. Shout out to Tingle, man.
Dead Tingle, man. We don't represent Tingle around here, my G. We don't represent Tingle.
Man. Tingle needs to come back. Bring him back, man.
Thank you so much, Arekkz, and thank you all for staying with us. As you can tell, me and Arekkz love The Legend of Zelda, and this is going to be a 2-part, as I said in the beginning. So I'm going to be sitting down with another amazing individual, talking even more about The Legend of Zelda for the 35th anniversary.